go down here, first of all. The only reason that Glasgow really exists was down to this community, which was run by a chap whose name was Kentigern, although his nickname was Mungo. So Kentigern means wolf or hound, and Mungo means dear friend or beloved one. So, and he formed this community here, and after he died, it became a place of pilgrimage. So he must have been, I think, a fairly attractive and interesting chap to have people come to stay here. How did he end up here? Well, we'll start just this little bit, which is a bit of an anachronistic one, because this is sort of an addition. It's at the side of the cathedral. It doesn't really fit in with the architectural thing it was added, but stories are wonderful things, and just going back here, this little bit here, which is an aisle that this is the only way in and out. But up here we have something which is where the story starts, which is this is a representation of a chap called Fergus. Now the story goes that Mungo, that we hear more of, ended up here because he was, before he came here, he was in a community that was run by a chap called Fergus. Fergus died, and either because Fergus said so or because a vision or whatever, Fergus's body went on an ox cart, and Kentigern said, wherever this ox cart stops, I'll bury Fergus's body and I'll form a community. And the legend is that this is where it stopped. And the legend is it's where he's buried, but that could be just wonderful stories. So anyway, this bit was added. The thought was that it was going to be 2 stories. The architecture, the pillars aren't quite as impressive as the ones we'll see in a minute, but the ceiling bosses went a bit sort of wonderfully over the top with that. And it was originally Fergus Isle. It was then finished by the first Archbishop of Glasgow, Blackadder, now known as the Blackadder Isle. And Blackadder made sure he had to put his mark on it, because there are quite a few of the bosses that got his shield. We were saying people always like to see that things. So we'll go on and see the real thing. No, that's later. The original, this is what we're looking at here is sort of the third cathedral. There was a very small one which was consecrated in 1135. Then there was a larger one, each bishop wanted to build a bigger one, and there are, we'll see there's a bits of that, and then the third cathedral started in sort of the 1180s, 1190s, and finished by about 1400. So this is where the pilgrims would have come, and this lower church is where Mungo's body was buried. The oldest bit of stone in the cathedral is in this little bit here. Is this pillar and this thing, this wall, and that is reckoned to be a reuse of a bit of the pillar from the second cathedral. But the third, this is one where well, let's go through here, because this is where it will be a tomb. It's I don't think anybody knows what it is. There's 2 more tombs in here again. I think they might have been originally outside or whatever, but they're not original. Yes, that's right, yeah. Yeah, indeed. So this is what people would walk around the ambulatory, and this is where the tomb means. Now, the first thing I think that is quite amazing about this is that the vaulting, the stone vaulting in the roof is very fine and beautiful, and the way that, even though we've got the weight of thousands of tons of stone above us, there's a lovely sort of openness and light feeling about this area. If we go across here, and you can see the way that the stonemasons have designed it, that the sight lines are all towards the tomb, and even though we've got, the way we've been able to get these slender pillars around the tomb, and then some of the finest stone carving in the cathedral is on these 4 pillars around the tomb. Each master mason had a different design, and the intricacy of the work is quite astonishing. This is the tomb, yes. Nobody, of course, knows who the masons were. It lends us this amazing the 12th century, 12th and 13th. 12th started in the 12th century, and probably this bit would have been finished in the 13th century. Yeah, it is. And so, going further down,
Does this celebrate the Mass here? Celebrate the Mass here?
No, this isn't intended to use for this isn't used for church services. Sometimes there are concerts here, but it's not used we'll touch on the various ways that the traditional use of the church has changed over the centuries. Originally, this section at the end here would have been the Lady Chapel, when you look at the ceiling here, the intricacy and the design of the bosses, and being able to create a space here for what would have been the Lady Chapel. Yes, you're seeing about how things have changed. Yeah, we'll go on to that. This pillar here, it's quite interesting. Can you see the? This is what's known as a mason's mark. So each mason would have his own mark, each master mason, and so there's another one there. And if the mason was particularly pleased with the work, he would put his mark on the stone. The other ones are graffiti, of course. We ignore them. The interesting thing is that the mason's marks, they can trace them through other cathedrals, and so you might get a master mason that was working, let's say, on Lincoln Cathedral in England, and then when the work was finished there, he would move here, and there's no records at all, obviously, of these people, but you can trace them through. Well, that's the same mark, so each mason would have their own unique mark. Nobody knows their name or anything, but here we are. Now down here, we've got what's known as Mungo well. You look down well. You look down well. Well, here we are. There's no water in the well today. just money. Did you know that money flows in the bottom of wells? So that's a medieval well. It doesn't. It only tends to have water in it if there's been a lot of rain in Glasgow, because it's fed by underground. It's fed by underground streams rather than a spring. I think.
Oh, not very
Maybe
deep.
a trace of water, maybe there. Yes, so it probably was either used for ceremonial washing or things. I don't know if it was a proper water supply. It's not reliable. The one stone that's quite interesting is this one here, because this was excavated in 1918 and is a stone from the first cathedral. So you can see it was very different. The stonework was plain, but very, very highly decorated indeed. So you're looking at something that would have been produced in about the 1130s, 1140s, so hundreds of years ago, and it's still quite colourful, so it must have been a wonderful riot of colour when you first, it was first opened. This bit here again shows the way that things change over the years. This is reckoned to be part of a shrine that would have been to Mungo, and this would have been in the choir section of the church, immediately above the tomb. You might have seen similar things in other cathedrals, but there's a photograph, or I guess, as to what what it might have been upstairs. Yes, and that's but how things change. The next one along is the nurses' chapel. The nurses' chapel with one of Scotland's historical figures, Bishop Wishart, who was very much a promoter of Robert the Bruce against the English. So his effigy is there, but there's no head on it, but it's reckoned that's Robert the Bruce. The other reason that some people come here to see that, the other reason some people are quite keen on the nurses' chapel is an American TV series called Outlander, and this was one where the star went back in time, and she was eventually in France, and this was where they filmed one of the scenes in Outlander. But how it is different people that all the scenes in Scotland, it was very in England earlier, Henry VIII was taken over Scotland. So all the windows were lost Reformation. The glass were recently. I think this will be into the little shed in the church. It's 1980, and it's Te Dei Laudamus, which you probably know from worship, and you can see all the earth doth worship thee. We praise thee. We praise thee, O God, Father of infinite majesty. We acknowledge thee to be the Lord. Is what it was. So it was partly marking a person who'd been a minister of the church for quite a long time, but it's wider than that. And I think we start at the top with the sun and the moon, and then we've got these sort of really wonderful angels coming down, and then the symbols of Christ, Alpha and Omega, and the life. And then the middle section is the detail in the middle section is quite amazing, because we've got the river and the trees and the rainbow, and the right-hand side we've got a lamb. We've even got a red squirrel, which is kind of fun. And then the person that is mentioned, he was a chaplain to the late Queen, so that's why he's got that. And he was also involved in one of the, it's either St. John or one of the ancient orders of chivalry, and the World House of the Church. See that. And then we've got St. Peter and St. Paul, St. Peter and St. Paul, and then Mungo and Columba. So it's, I think what I like about it is it's this sort of little dark thing. We've got this absolute explosion of colour, really sort of St. John. And that's one of the more modern ones. This little lower chapter house here has got quite a history because in 1440s, a chap called Turnbull was appointed Bishop of Glasgow, and he was a graduate at the University of St Andrews, and he said, I think Glasgow should have a university. So we asked the king petitioned the Pope, and the Pope said yes. So the papal rule was granted in 1451, and the first meetings of University of Glasgow were here in the Lower Chapter House. Yeah, the universities tended to be very much formed by the church. I mean, the church was the way that learning happened. It wasn't the state; it was very much the church.
Here, Glasgow University is the second big oldest, I think. No?
Yes, in Scotland. Yes, yeah. And the fourth in the UK, so we've got Oxford and Cambridge, then St Andrews, then Glasgow. Yep. So you've probably seen, you were looking at the plaques on the floor, so there's quite a few of these all the way. Lots of them, and you might think, oh well, are these all graves here? Well, again, they speak to a way that the church has been used for different things over the centuries. So after the Reformation in 1560, there were three churches that met because all the churches were taken over by the Protestant churches. So this one survived. All the other cathedrals in Scotland were demolished. So there were three churches that met. There was one that met down here called the Lower Church, or the Barony Kirk, the High Kirk, or the Upper Kirk, and then the Outer Kirk. So the Lower Church, the choir, and the nave, there were three separate congregations, and they created separate entrances so that the three different congregations could meet independently. So talk about using a building for multi-purpose. In 1800, the church that met down here, and as you can see, the configuration is not very good, all the pillars, they moved out to their own building in Cathedral Square. So then they said, well, we've got this empty space down here, and what should we do with it? And we didn't have tourists from Perth and Australia and things like that in those days. So somebody had the bright idea, we'll just pile in a whole lot of earth and start burying bodies, because you notice the graveyard around the church. So it was full by then. So they piled in earth and they started burying bodies down here of the nobility of Glasgow, if you like. Fortunately, after the necropolis, which is the garden cemetery on the other side of Mullindown-Burn, once that was built, they said, not such a good idea having all this earth down in the basement, in our foundations. So the earth was taken out, and all the bodies that had been interred here were reinterred there, but to mark where the bodies spent some time. So the bodies were actually buried above that with this earth. But you wouldn't believe it now that somebody would say, "Oh, we'll just pile in all the earth." These three cabinets what was a comprehensive reglazing of all the windows in the cathedral in the 1850s. As I say, after the Reformation, in 1560, the windows were knocked out. Then there was, for a time, I think there was no windows. Then bits of glass were put in. But by the 1800s, Glasgow had become one of the wealthiest cities in the world. The great and the good said, I think we should have the best glazing that's available now. Because of taxation, the UK had a glass tax that meant that it became uneconomic to run glass works in the UK. I can't think where the world happening in America. Oh, in America, yes, there are duties and things, but the same thing. So the committee decided the best place to go was the Bavarian Glass Works, otherwise known as the Royal Munich Glass Works. And it was run by a chap called Einmüller, and it was unusual because rather than stained glass, where you traditionally get little bits of glass and you fix them into lead, like we've seen there and we'll see in the elsewhere, they specialised in painted glass. So this is, if you look at it, it's actually one sheet of glass. Mm-hmm. If you look from a distance, you think, oh, that's the usual lead between it, but no, it's to make it look as if it's leaded glass. So it's painted glass. Now, so this is Joseph, and the problem was that Glasgow was very heavily polluted then with smoke because everything burnt coal. The houses burnt coal, the offices burnt coal, the steam locomotives burnt coal, the industry burnt coal, the ships on the Clyde burnt coal. There was even a gasworks burning coal just outside the cathedral. Now all that high sulphur smoke meant that the glass ended up black. These ones have been restored. The fashion and sort of what people like changes. There was a time when people thought this is sort of Victorian type of thing. It's not right, but I think now that the skill and the craftsmanship people now admire. The one that this would be the angel. Below this angel, there would be a glass of Ruth. The story of Ruth and Boaz, wonderful. Wonderful, one of the best romantic stories probably ever written, the tale of Ruth and Naomi and Boaz. And then the last one, it's reckoned that Einmüller himself probably painted this one, and the delicacy and the craftsmanship of the drawing. Of course, we've got the privilege it's down at eye level rather than being way up high. We can study it. And this is one of these ones where the eyes follow you if you walk past it. If you walk past it, the eyes will follow you. Yes. But I think the care and the detail, and also the folds. The folds and the fabric have been pictured very well. So
they are original.
They're original. They're being restored. Yes, these have been restored. These are, as they date back to the 1850s. They originally would have been obviously in the windows of the cathedral, but they were taken out in the 1930s because they had all gone black. They were all very, very bad. Now we want a bit more of the story of Mungo. So we've got here a tapestry, which the tapestry was made by the Edinburgh Tapestry Works. The two outside panels focus on the creation. We've got the rain and sun and moon, and probably that's Moses with the burning bush, and then we've got Noah with the rainbow. But the middle panel is the story of St. Mungo.
We heard about that.
Yep.
The bird.
The bird, yeah. So, yeah, so you probably heard about the tale. So as I say, he ended up, if we go back before the bits I was talking about earlier, he grew up, allegedly he was the illegitimate son of a princess, and in the east of Scotland. So the princess was either banished from the court or she fled, and she ended up a little boat on the Firth of Forth, went trusted herself to God, and ended up at a place called Curas, where a chap called Serf, S-E-R-F, he had a monastery. Mungo, his mother, Senu, gave birth to him in this monastery, and he grew up there with other boys in Serf's monastery. Now, Serf had a pet robin, and one day one of the boys killed the robin, and Mungo found it as he was walking, and he thought, well, Serf loses robin. So he picked it up, put it in his hands, and it came back to life. So as you can tell, these are all wonderful medieval tales that may or may not be true. Later on, Mungo had become the favoured boy in the community, in the monastery, and they were a bit jealous of him. So one night he was on duty to make sure the fire wouldn't go out. And if in the 500s, if the fire goes out, it's bad news. He fell asleep. Another boy came, saw he was asleep, got a bucket of water and put the fire out. Mungo woke up, knew that he would be in big trouble because he'd not kept his responsibility of staying awake during the night. He went out on the bitter cold January night and found a twig, probably a hazel twig. It's usually portrayed as oak, but the hazel's got more of a medieval sort of, I don't know, growth and sort of hazel sort of buds. So anyway, he got this hazel twig branch and put it in the fireplace, and guess what? Spontaneously combustion. Yes. So let's see, after he then went to where Fergus was, Fergus came here, Mungo started his community, it grew, lots of people were attracted to come. So one day when he'd had his established community here, one day suddenly a night, and any good medieval story, we've had a princess, being illegitimate son, all this, but the next one we've got to have a knight, and so the knight turns up here, and important knight, probably from Dumbarton, which is down the Clyde, which is where the seat of the king was. So the knight said, I'm in big trouble. I'm a good friend with the king and the queen, and the queen gave me this ring. Now the king is a bit suspicious of my affections towards the queen. Now it may be that his suspicions were correct, or maybe not, but anyway, the king said to the queen, I haven't seen that ring for a long time, and I don't have it anymore. He said, I was out hunting with the king, and either I lost it, or maybe the king saw it, took it, and threw it away, but I don't have it. And if we don't get this ring back, it could be a bit terminal for myself and the queen. So Mungo said to one of his followers, go down to the Clyde with your fishing rod and bring back. Now, in the 500s, there's other evidence that Clyde was the best summer in the country, so much so there's another record from that time which said that when the salmon are running, if you take the boat out of the Clyde, you cut down the salmon for land in the sun. So sure enough, one of Mungo's followers came back, gave the salmon, Mungo opened it up, and guess what? In the mouth of the salmon was the ring. So Mungo gave the ring to the knight. The knight got on his horse, back down to the Dumbarton, gave it to the queen, and the queen was able to see, oh dear, there's your ring. Later on, there's a story that Mungo went to Rome and was given a bell by the Pope. That seems even more fanciful, but certainly a bell was cast later on, and it became known as Mungo's bell, and you would pay to have it rung for you. So Glasgow was built in myths and legends. So you've probably heard similar tales about these before. So it's always these four symbols you see in Glasgow's coat of arms. Right, so should we go up to the choir? The Reformation, King Charles II said, when we were talking about people wanting power, and he said, "Oh, I want to be king of the church." And there was the Covenanters in Scotland that signed what was called the Solemn League and Covenant, and that was that the only head of the church is Christ. And Charles, there's a bit of a power play between Charles II and the Covenanters. And quite a few of them paid for their thing with their life. And then after that, there was the Glorious Revolution with William and Mary. Again, another difficult period.
It was fully Catholic, isn't it?
William and Mary, no, that's a different Mary. This is William and Mary, who were later on. But you're right, if you go, William and Mary were 1690, 1688. But you were thinking Mary Queen of Scots, and that was in the 1500s. She was 1500s, the late 1500s. She was Queen of Kings. But you're right, Mary Queen of Scots was Catholic, and Elizabeth was Protestant. Mary Queen of Scots was in prison and didn't have a very happy life. Yeah.
One sister, no, they are sisters, isn't it?
Related, yes, related. They weren't. So we come through the pulpit and into the choir. So the choir, yes. So the organ, yes. So there's yes, a rather large organ. It was built by one of the leading organ builders called Willis, and as well as the two cases there, the organ pipes along the triforium. The ceiling was restored in 1910 to 1912, and you can't really see it because of the lighting, but there are some quite impressive ceiling bosses on the ceiling. So if you look at them it's a bit difficult to see, but down the middle you've got pictures from the life of Christ. So we have the Annunciation, the first one, and then the Baptism by John the Baptist, and then the third one, you'll see the devil is there, so that's the temptation, yeah. And then the fourth